My unfaithful wife was hiding something, but I noticed a condom in her purse, so I planned how to catch her off guard. She was shocked and realized it was over. Hey everyone, my name is Tyler, and I'm 29 years old. For years, I've been living what most people would call the dream life. I had everything sorted out both personally and professionally. And from the outside, my life probably looked perfect. Like one of those Instagram posts that everyone stops scrolling to admire and secretly envy. Miami became my home about 4 years ago when I decided to make a major life change, and I've never looked back since moving here. There's something about this city, with its endless sunshine and crystal-clear beaches, that just clicked perfectly with my lifestyle and personality. The energy here matches exactly what I needed in my life. I work as a marketing coordinator for a major company, which pays me solid money that lets me live comfortably without constantly worrying about finances. I've got a nice apartment in a good area of the city, drive a decent car without stressing about the monthly payments, and I never have to sacrifice the things I enjoy doing. It's the kind of financial stability that gives you real peace of mind. For the past 6 years, I've been married to Victoria, who seemed like everything I could ever want in a partner when we first got together. She was smart, incredibly beautiful, and had this magnetic personality that just drew people to her effortlessly. Everyone who met us always said we looked perfect together, like we were made for each other. We were the couple other people looked up to and aspired to be like. But everything started to unravel on a Wednesday morning, when the skies were overcast and there was light rain coming down steadily. It was one of those heavy, oppressive days where the air feels thick and humid, like it's hiding secrets that you're not supposed to know about. I had taken the day off work specifically to fix our bathroom faucet, which had been dripping constantly for weeks and driving us both crazy. It wasn't exactly the most exciting way to spend a day off from work, but there's something genuinely satisfying about fixing things yourself instead of calling a repairman and paying hundreds of dollars for something you can handle on your own. I was working under the sink when the wrench slipped unexpectedly and smashed my knuckle hard against the pipe. The pain was immediate and sharp, and I cursed loud enough that I probably woke up half the neighbors in our building. I got up from under the sink to grab a bandage from the upstairs bathroom, still nursing my throbbing knuckle. When I walked into our bedroom, I noticed that Victoria's dresser drawer was slightly open. Not like she had meant to leave it that way, but more like she had gotten distracted while getting ready for work and simply forgot to close it properly. It was such a small detail, but something about it caught my attention. Inside the drawer, wedged between a pile of colorful hair ties and an unused vanilla-scented candle she'd gotten as a gift months ago, I spotted something that made my blood run cold. There was a brand new box of condoms sitting there, still in its original packaging, looking completely out of place among her usual belongings. I stood there staring at it for what felt like an entire hour, my mind racing to find some logical explanation. The thing is, we hadn't used protection in years, not since the early days of our relationship. Victoria had been on birth control for as long as I could remember, and we were supposed to be in an exclusive, committed marriage. At least I thought we were exclusive. At least I had been completely faithful to her throughout our entire relationship. The sight of those condoms felt like discovering a smoking gun in a crime I didn't even know was being committed. I forced myself not to touch the box or pick it up to examine it more closely. Instead, I carefully memorized exactly where it was placed in the drawer, taking what felt like a mental photograph of the entire scene for evidence. The way it was positioned, slightly hidden but not completely concealed, told me that Victoria wasn't trying too hard to hide it. She just wasn't expecting me to be looking through her things. I slowly closed the drawer with trembling hands and walked out of the bedroom, my mind spinning with possibilities I didn't want to consider. I didn't even bother to patch up my bleeding knuckle from the wrench incident. The physical pain suddenly seemed completely insignificant compared to what I had just discovered. Something much bigger and more devastating was wrong in my marriage, and I could feel my entire world starting to shift beneath my feet like an earthquake was building up underground. That evening, I decided to make Victoria's favorite meal as a test of sorts. I prepared chicken Alfredo with that rich, creamy sauce she always requested whenever she wanted comfort food, the same dish we used to share when we were broke college students surviving on ramen and dreams. I even opened a bottle of red wine, setting the table like it was some kind of special occasion, though my heart was pounding with anxiety the entire time. When Victoria walked through the front door after work, she smiled at me with what should have been warmth and affection. But for the first time in years, her smile felt completely empty and hollow, like it didn't reach her eyes at all. I had been so focused on making her happy for so long that I hadn't noticed when her expression started feeling more like performances than genuine emotions. Lately, Nothing about her seemed authentic or real. It was like she was always acting for an invisible audience. "Special occasion?" she asked casually, shrugging off her jacket with a dramatic flair that reminded me of someone in a movie who knows they're being watched. Victoria had always had this theatrical quality about her, especially when she felt confident and untouchable, but now it struck me as calculated rather than charming. "Nope," I replied as calmly as I could manage, trying to keep my voice steady and normal. "Just missed having dinner with you like we used to." She leaned in and kissed my cheek, but the kiss was too quick and too light, lacking any real intimacy or connection. Then she slid into her chair at the dining table, like absolutely nothing was wrong in our world. As we ate, Victoria started talking enthusiastically about her coworker Derek again, something she had been doing more and more frequently over the past few weeks. She told me stories about how he made her laugh during meetings, how he had accidentally bought her 2 coffees that morning because he forgot he had already gotten her one, and how thoughtful and funny he was compared to their other colleagues. She rolled her eyes dismissively when she talked about Derek's supposed clumsiness, trying to make it sound like his attention was just an innocent workplace friendship. But I noticed the way her lips curved into a subtle smile when she mentioned his name, and I could see that these memories meant significantly more to her than she was letting on. There was a warmth in her voice when she talked about him that I hadn't heard when she talked about me in months. That night, while Victoria was taking her usual long shower, I made a decision that would change everything between us. I went through her purse methodically, looking for any evidence that might explain the condoms I had found earlier. Hidden in a side pocket underneath old receipts and random business cards, I found exactly what I was afraid I would discover. There was a receipt from a boutique hotel across town, dated just 2 nights ago. The itemized bill showed room service for 2 people, including a single bottle of red wine, the same type of wine we both preferred because we've always hated beer. Victoria had been at that hotel with someone else, someone who apparently shared her taste in drinks, and she had never mentioned this trip to me at all. I stood there in our bedroom, holding the evidence of my wife's betrayal, and I made a conscious decision not to confront her immediately. Victoria had always been incredibly clever with her lies and manipulation tactics. I had watched her gaslight friends and family members before, twisting stories and situations just enough to walk away clean from any accusations. If I came at her unprepared and emotional, she would deny everything convincingly and probably make me look like a paranoid, controlling husband. I had seen her operate this way too many times before. She had a talent for making other people question their own perceptions and memories. If I was going to expose the truth, I needed to build a case that was so airtight and comprehensive that she couldn't lie her way out of it, no matter how skilled she was at manipulation. The next day, I started building a comprehensive case that Victoria wouldn't be able to lie her way out of, no matter how skilled she was at twisting the truth. I went to my friend Kyle, who works in tech and has always been reliable when I needed help with anything computer-related. I told him I was genuinely worried about Victoria's safety and wanted to make sure she was okay when she was out alone, especially with her working late so frequently recently. Kyle didn't ask too many probing questions about my request, which I appreciated. He just looked at me with concern in his voice and asked, "You good, man?" I told him yes, even though I definitely wasn't anywhere close to being good. He handed me a small GPS tracking device and explained how to set it up discreetly, along with some basic instructions for monitoring the data remotely. I carefully planted the tracker inside Victoria's favorite purse, the expensive leather one she took to every client meeting and important work event. I hid it in the lining where she would never think to look for anything suspicious, and then I settled in to wait and watch. For the first week, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then 2 more weeks passed, and I started to see a pattern emerging that confirmed my worst fears. The location pins on my phone started dropping in places Victoria had told me she'd never been to before. Twice, the GPS showed her at hotels I had never heard of, and once it clearly indicated she was at Derek's apartment complex, the same place she had sworn to me she had never visited when I casually asked about it weeks earlier. Another lie to add to what was becoming a growing collection of deceptions. Victoria wasn't even trying to hide her behavior anymore, which told me she felt completely confident that I was oblivious to what was happening. One Thursday night, she came home and told me about a yoga retreat she was planning to attend over the weekend. She even made a show of packing a yoga mat in her car, like it was a prop in some amateur theater production designed to fool the most gullible audience member. I kissed her goodbye at the front door that Friday morning, playing the role of the loving, trusting husband perfectly. Then I waited about 10 minutes before getting in my car and following her route using the GPS tracker on my phone, staying far enough behind that she wouldn't notice my headlights. The little blinking dot on my screen felt like a countdown timer to the end of our marriage. When Victoria pulled into the parking lot of the same boutique hotel where I had found the receipt, I parked across the street and just watched everything unfold. She got out of her car wearing tight jeans and high heels. Definitely not the kind of outfit you'd wear to practice downward dog or any other yoga poses. This was clearly the outfit of a woman preparing for a romantic evening with someone who wasn't her husband. Derek walked out of the hotel's front entrance a few minutes later, and I recognized him immediately from Victoria's social media posts and the few times she had pointed him out at company events. He was wearing the same gray hoodie that I had found mixed in with our laundry once and couldn't explain. Another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. He opened her car door for her like a perfect gentleman, which would have been sweet if he wasn't helping my wife cheat on me. I watched as Victoria touched Derek's chest affectionately, the way she used to touch me when we were first dating, and everything felt new and exciting. They looked completely comfortable together, like they had been intimate for much longer than I had suspected. The familiarity between them was obvious even from across the street. They didn't flinch or look around nervously. They acted like a couple who had done this many times before. I didn't feel the explosive anger that I thought I would experience in a moment like this. Instead, I just watched them disappear into the hotel lobby together, and I started planning methodically how I was going to destroy Victoria slowly and quietly from the inside out. She wanted to play games behind my back and treat our marriage like it was meaningless? It was time to show her what real strategy and patience looked like when someone finally decided to fight back. I waited 3 long hours in the darkness, parked across from that boutique hotel with my engine turned off, and my seat reclined just enough to hide my face from anyone who might be looking in my direction. My hands were clenched tightly the entire time, not from rage or even heartbreak, but from the intense pressure building inside me. The pressure that comes from knowing something devastating and not being able to act on it yet. At exactly 1:27 a.m., the hotel's front doors finally opened, and Victoria came out first, laughing loudly in a way that echoed across the empty parking lot. Her hand was intertwined with Derek's like they owned the world and didn't care who might see them together. Derek followed close behind her, pulling her close to his body like he possessed her completely, like she belonged to him instead of being married to me. Victoria's hair was messy in that specific way I used to love seeing after we had been intimate, that lazy post-sex chaos that she used to pretend was natural, but was actually the result of passionate moments between two people. Except now, seeing it caused by another man's hands made my stomach turn violently. The sight of her disheveled appearance was like a physical blow to my chest. What struck me most was that she didn't look over her shoulder even once during the entire time I watched them. She didn't scan the parking lot or check to see if anyone was observing their behavior. Victoria was completely oblivious to my presence across the street, too caught up in her fantasy romance to be careful or cautious about getting caught. Instead of getting into Victoria's car, they both got into Derek's vehicle, which told me this was a planned arrangement rather than a spontaneous decision. I followed them carefully back to his apartment complex, the same place she had sworn to me she had never visited, adding yet another lie to my growing list of her deceptions. I was starting to realize that almost everything she had told me about her relationship with Derek had been completely fabricated. I watched from the street as the lights turned on in an upstairs window of his building. 2 silhouettes moved close together behind the curtains, and even from this distance, Victoria's distinctive shape was unmistakable. Then the curtains closed on their private show, and I knew I had seen enough for one night. I didn't stay to watch any more of their intimate moments together. Instead, I drove home in complete silence, with no radio playing and deliberately not allowing myself to think about what I had just witnessed. There were only my headlights cutting through the darkness ahead of me, which felt like some twisted metaphor for the future I thought Victoria and I had been building together. When I finally got back to our house, I went straight into our bedroom closet and pulled out the fireproof box where we keep all our important documents stored safely. Inside were our birth certificates, our marriage license, insurance papers, and all the other official proof of the life we had supposedly built together as a committed couple. I took detailed photos of everything with my phone, then opened a private folder on my laptop computer that I titled Home Projects. Something innocuous enough that Victoria would never bother looking at it, even if she happened to use my computer. I started storing all my evidence there piece by piece, creating a comprehensive digital file of her infidelity. Victoria never touches my computer files anyway, too busy managing her own secret digital life with her various men. The next morning, Victoria walked through our front door at exactly 9:15 a.m. and I could immediately smell the hotel soap and borrowed cologne clinging to her skin. It was a different scent than anything I wear, and the smell of another man on my wife was almost overwhelming in its obviousness. She was practically advertising her affair to anyone with a functioning sense of smell. She kissed the top of my head casually like absolutely nothing had happened, acting like she had just spent an innocent night at some spiritual yoga retreat with a group of women. "You're up early," she said, with an exaggerated yawn, stretching her arms above her head like a satisfied cat who had just finished a particularly good meal. "Just couldn't sleep well last night," I replied, as calmly as I could manage, which was actually the truth. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down across from me at our kitchen table, and I studied her face carefully for any signs of guilt or remorse. There was nothing. No second glances, no nervous behavior, no hint that she had just spent the night betraying our marriage vows. It was like she had completely mastered the art of erasing me from her conscience. That afternoon, I made my next strategic move in what was becoming an elaborate chess game between us. I bought a burner phone from a convenience store and sent Derek a message from an anonymous number that simply read, "Hey man, if you're going to fuck my wife, at least have the balls to make eye contact next time." Derek didn't respond to my text message, but exactly 1 hour later, Victoria sent me a message that confirmed my suspicions about their communication. "Hey babe, weird day at the office today," she wrote. "Might be running late tonight, sorry." The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. Derek had obviously warned her that someone knew about their affair. I didn't respond to Victoria's message either. If she wanted to play the silent game and pretend like everything was normal, then two could play that game. But I was playing it much better than she was because I had all the information, and she was still operating under the assumption that I was completely clueless about her double life. That evening, I took the next strategic step in my plan to document Victoria's infidelity comprehensively. I installed 2 motion-activated cameras in our house, one positioned discreetly in the hallway and another in our bedroom. They weren't hidden in some elaborate spy movie fashion, just positioned carefully enough that they would capture everything without being immediately obvious to someone who wasn't specifically looking for them. The remarkable thing was that Victoria never noticed the cameras at all, which told me everything I needed to know about how much attention she was paying to our shared living space. She never paid attention to anything I did around the house anymore, unless it directly benefited her in some way. I had essentially become invisible in my own home, which was both painful and strategically useful for my evidence-gathering mission. That weekend, Victoria told me about an important corporate conference that she supposedly had to attend, claiming she needed to fly out of town for 3 days. I played the role of the supportive husband perfectly, helping her pack her business clothes and professional outfits while she sat on our bed scrolling through her phone and completely ignoring my presence. I even told her, "I'll miss you," with genuine conviction as I kissed her goodbye at the airport terminal. An Oscar-worthy performance considering what I actually knew about her plans. The moment Victoria passed through airport security and disappeared from view, I immediately opened the cloud server on my phone to check her GPS location. Within hours, I watched her signal move to the exact same hotel where she had taken Derek before, confirming that this corporate conference was just another elaborate lie to cover up her affair. But this time, she wasn't meeting Derek at all. Instead, I observed her through the tracking data meeting with a completely different man. An older guy who appeared to be in his mid-40s with a balding head, expensive watch, and no wedding ring visible. Victoria laughed with him in exactly the same way she had laughed with Derek, displaying the same body language and intimate gestures that I had witnessed before. That's when the horrible truth hit me like a devastating punch to the gut. Derek wasn't the only man Victoria was seeing behind my back. He was just one piece of a much larger and more complex puzzle that I hadn't fully understood until this moment. This wasn't a simple case of a wife having an affair with one coworker. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness that could potentially be forgiven and worked through. Victoria had turned cheating into a complete lifestyle choice, a systematic approach to deception that involved multiple men and elaborate cover stories. I was married to a woman who had weaponized betrayal and turned it into an art form. She was operating an entire network of relationships while maintaining the facade of being a devoted wife, and I was just the convenient home base that provided stability while she explored her options. That night, I made a conscious decision to stop calling her Victoria in my head. From that moment forward, she was just her, a stranger who had stolen my wife's identity and was wearing it like a mask. She was going to learn what it felt like to be completely outplayed at her own game, and I was going to be the one teaching her that lesson. 3 days passed before she returned home from her fake conference, and she came back with a gift bag from the airport, like she was trying to maintain the illusion of being a thoughtful, traveling spouse. Inside the bag was a novelty coffee mug with a generic city skyline, a cheap scented candle that smelled artificial, and a t-shirt that was at least 2 sizes too small for me. Clear evidence that she had grabbed random items at the last minute without any thought about what I might actually like or use. I watched her pretend that she had carefully selected these gifts while thinking about me during her business trip. Her performance was absolutely Academy Award worthy, complete with manufactured exhaustion as she complained dramatically about how draining corporate conferences could be and how much she had missed sleeping in her own bed. I nodded sympathetically and let her settle into our living room, watching as she kicked off her high heels and immediately started scrolling through her phone like nothing unusual had happened. While she relaxed, I made dinner for both of us, lasagna, which was supposedly her favorite dish and something I had been making for her for years. I poured her a glass of white wine and handed her the plate with what I hoped looked like a genuine smile. She took one bite of the lasagna, looked up at me with a confused expression and asked, "Babe, did you use different cheese this time?" I had deliberately used Parmesan instead of mozzarella in the recipe. The only reason Victoria noticed the difference in the cheese was because she had eaten the exact same lasagna just 2 nights ago, from room service at the hotel where she had been staying with her latest affair partner. She didn't realize that I had accessed her hotel bill online and knew precisely what she had ordered during her fake business trip. She had no idea that I was keeping a detailed score of every lie, every inconsistency, and every careless mistake she made that revealed the truth about her double life. That night, while Victoria took her usual long shower to wash away the evidence of her weekend affair, I went through her purse in the same hidden spot where I had found previous incriminating evidence. This time, I discovered a receipt from a gas station located 3 towns over from where she had claimed to be attending her corporate conference. The receipt was time-stamped during the exact time she said she was attending a mandatory business dinner with her colleagues. Another lie to add to my comprehensive collection. I started building what was becoming an incredibly detailed timeline of her deceptions. Every receipt I found, every GPS ping recorded by the tracker, every lie she told me was carefully cataloged with specific dates, times, and locations. I created a spreadsheet with multiple columns on my laptop, including one specifically dedicated to documenting her fake excuses and the evidence that contradicted each story she had told me. At first, this meticulous record-keeping was just to help me understand the scope of what was happening and to make sense of the chaos that my marriage had become. But by the time I finished organizing everything into a comprehensive database, I realized I had built an airtight legal case that would be impossible for Victoria to dispute or explain away. And I wasn't even close to being finished with my investigation. This was just the beginning of my long-term strategy. Victoria thought she was playing chess with an amateur opponent, but I was about to flip the entire board and show her what real strategic thinking looked like when someone finally decided to fight back with patience and intelligence. The next morning, I quietly booked a consultation session with a divorce attorney who had a reputation for handling complex infidelity cases. When I walked into his office, I didn't want general advice or emotional support. I wanted pure strategy and legal warfare tactics. I spread out all my evidence methodically across his conference table. The photos, the GPS tracking logs, the hotel receipts, the surveillance footage from the hallway cameras, and complete backups of her text message conversations that I had cloned from her phone. The lawyer examined everything I had collected with the calm professionalism of someone who had seen this type of situation many times before. He looked over each piece of evidence carefully, taking notes and asking specific questions about dates and locations. When he finished reviewing my documentation, he looked me straight in the eyes and asked me one simple but crucial question. Do you want to end this marriage clean and quietly, or do you want to make her feel the full consequences of what she's done? I looked him straight back in the eyes without hesitation and said, both. He smiled with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how to accomplish that goal, and then he gave me a detailed plan that would systematically dismantle Victoria's life while protecting my own interests completely. Step 1 of his strategy was for me to continue acting completely normal at home, giving Victoria no indication that I knew anything about her affairs. That very night, I told Victoria something that I knew would catch her off guard. I said I had been feeling emotionally distant from her lately and wanted to try something new to reconnect our marriage. I suggested that we should go to couples therapy together to work through whatever issues were creating distance between us. Victoria actually laughed out loud at my suggestion, like it was the funniest joke she had heard in months. What? You think I'm cheating on something? She said, Still laughing like the idea was absolutely ridiculous and absurd. I forced myself to laugh along with her convincingly, even though that fake laughter burned my throat and made me feel sick to my stomach. But I nodded enthusiastically and played my part in this twisted performance perfectly. "No, of course not," I said with apparent sincerity. "I just want to feel close to you again, like we used to be when we first got married." Victoria smiled warmly and leaned in closer to me, kissing me on the lips like a woman who knew she was winning every game she was playing. Her confidence in that moment was almost breathtaking. She was completely convinced that she had me fooled and under her control. We booked our first couples therapy session for the following Thursday, and she seemed genuinely excited about the opportunity to manipulate a professional therapist the same way she had been manipulating me. Meanwhile, I was preparing my next strategic move in what was becoming an increasingly sophisticated psychological campaign. I sent Derek another special delivery, a thick manila envelope with no return address that I mailed directly to his workplace. Inside were high-quality photos taken from the hotel hallway security cameras, showing him and Victoria together in compromising situations, along with copies of text message logs that I had extracted from her phone backup files. I also included a short handwritten note that simply read, "She told me you were just a fling. Thought you should know you're not the only one she's seeing." I mailed this package to his office address, ensuring that he would receive it during business hours when his coworkers might be around to witness his reaction. I waited patiently for the inevitable explosion that would result from Derek discovering that he wasn't Victoria's only affair partner. 2 days later, at exactly 11:37 p.m., Victoria received a text message that made her immediately flip her phone face down on our coffee table. But I had seen Derek's name flash on her screen before she could hide it from me. The message I glimpsed read, "Don't ever talk to me again. You're sick, and I want nothing to do with you." Victoria tossed and turned restlessly all night long, clearly panicked about losing one of her affair partners. But she had no idea that I was lying awake next to her, watching her distress with a sense of quiet satisfaction. She had absolutely no clue that I was smiling in the darkness, knowing that this wasn't even revenge yet. This was just the preliminary warm-up phase. The real game was still to come, and I was already several moves ahead of her in planning the complete destruction of the life she had built on lies and betrayal. By Thursday, I had memorized my role in this elaborate performance perfectly. I was going to be the good husband, the forgiving partner, the man desperately trying to save our marriage from whatever mysterious forces were pulling us apart. Victoria walked into the therapist's office like she owned the entire building, her hair perfectly styled and her voice already prepared with that soft, vulnerable tone she used when she wanted to manipulate people who didn't know her true nature. Her face was a polished mask of concern and innocence as she settled into the comfortable chair across from our therapist. Before the professional had even asked a single question about our relationship, Victoria jumped in with her rehearsed explanation. "We just hit a rough patch recently," she said with practiced sincerity. "Nothing too serious, just the normal stuff that happens when two people have been together for a while." I didn't blink, react, or contradict her at all. Instead, I let her lie and build her elaborate fantasy brick by brick, story by story, while I was already mentally planning the complete demolition of everything she was constructing. I knew that every word coming out of her mouth was carefully calculated to make her look like the reasonable, rational partner who was trying to work through minor relationship issues. When the therapist finally turned to me and asked for my perspective on our marriage, I delivered my lines exactly as I had practiced them. "I want to rebuild everything we used to have," I said with apparent desperation. "But I feel like there are things she's not telling me. Important things that might help us understand what's really going wrong between us." Victoria immediately placed her hand on my knee in what was clearly a carefully rehearsed touch of fake intimacy, designed to reassure both me and the therapist that she was a loving, supportive wife. "There's nothing to hide here," she said with wide-eyed innocence that would have fooled complete strangers who had never seen her operate before. "I'm an open book, and I want to work through this together. But I wasn't a stranger. I was her husband, and I knew exactly what Victoria's lies looked like when she thought no one was watching her carefully. I had studied her deception techniques for months now, and I could see through every calculated gesture and manufactured emotion she was displaying. After our therapy session ended, Victoria suggested that we grab lunch together at a cafe she used to love back when we were genuinely happy, before she had started working late every night and disappearing for mysterious weekend trips. She talked enthusiastically about planning a romantic weekend getaway, even leaning across the table seductively to whisper, Let's start completely fresh, like we're falling in love all over again. I smiled warmly and responded with what sounded like genuine enthusiasm. Absolutely. I think that's exactly what we need. I was playing my part in her elaborate theater production perfectly, giving her no reason to suspect that I knew anything about her secret life with multiple men. That night, while Victoria took another one of her suspiciously long showers to wash away whatever evidence might be clinging to her from her latest affair, I made a decision to dig deeper into her digital life. I opened her laptop computer, which she had carelessly left unlocked and unprotected. A stupid mistake on her part that revealed just how overconfident she had become about hiding her activities. I went straight to her email account, and immediately two unread messages caught my attention. Both were from different men's names that I didn't recognize, and both had the exact same subject line. Last night was absolutely perfect. The identical phrasing told me that Victoria was using the same seductive language and romantic techniques with multiple affair partners, treating each of them like they were special, while actually following a calculated script. But the most devastating discovery was a draft message that Victoria had written, but hadn't sent yet. It was an unsent email to one of her affair partners that read, "He's getting suspicious lately. I'll handle it soon. Just be patient with me. Once the money situation is sorted, I'm gone." The money? She was talking about our money, our joint savings account, and shared financial assets that we had built together over 6 years of marriage. This wasn't just about sexual affairs or emotional betrayal anymore. Victoria was systematically planning to drain our accounts and abandon me financially, just like she had already abandoned me emotionally. I immediately logged into our joint bank account to check our financial situation, and what I discovered there made my blood run cold. There had been a series of small withdrawals over the past 4 months, each one timed strategically around our regular paydays to make them less noticeable. At first they seemed insignificant, maybe $50 or $100 here and there. But when I added them all up, almost $14,000 had vanished from our accounts without any trace of major purchases or legitimate expenses that could explain where the money had gone. Victoria was systematically draining our financial resources, taking small amounts at carefully spaced intervals to avoid detection, while she prepared to disappear from my life completely. She was building her escape fund one withdrawal at a time, probably stashing the cash somewhere I couldn't access it, getting ready to abandon our marriage once she had accumulated enough money to start fresh with one of her affair partners. Victoria thought she was being clever and subtle about her financial theft, just like she thought she was being clever about her affairs. But she had no idea that I was watching everything, documenting every transaction and building a comprehensive case that would expose not just her infidelity, but also her systematic theft of our shared assets. She thought she was ahead of me in this game, thought she was untouchable and smart enough to orchestrate the perfect disappearing act. But I had already decided to let her keep thinking that she was in control, while I prepared my own financial strategy that would protect everything I had worked for and leave her with absolutely nothing when the truth finally came to light. The next morning, I immediately scheduled an emergency meeting with my financial advisor to protect myself from Victoria's systematic theft of our shared assets. I moved half of our liquid assets into a separate account under only my name, a move that was completely legal and legitimate since I was protecting marital property from being stolen by my spouse. I also instructed him to freeze all the remaining accounts the moment I called, and gave him a specific code word that only I would know. At the same time, I started recording absolutely everything that happened in our house and every conversation between Victoria and me. I set up audio recording devices, expanded my video surveillance system, and began documenting every phone conversation when possible. Every single word that came out of Victoria's mouth was being carefully filed away as evidence, and every time she slipped up and contradicted herself, I had permanent proof of her lies. Meanwhile, Victoria started getting noticeably antsy and nervous, which told me that her carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble around her. Derek had gone completely silent after receiving my package of evidence, and I suspected that her other affair partners were probably growing cold and distant as well, now that they knew they weren't her only secret relationships. In response to losing her external validation, Victoria started clinging to me more desperately than she had in months. She began suggesting board game nights like we used to have in the early days of our marriage, touching me more frequently and affectionately than she had since her affairs began, and calling me babe again, like the words still held genuine meaning between us. She was trying to manipulate me back into submission and emotional dependence, using our shared history as leverage to maintain her position of control. One evening, while we were watching television together on the couch, Victoria looked at me with calculating eyes that were clearly trying to read my emotional state. "You've been acting different lately," she said, with carefully measured concern in her voice. "I can't quite put my finger on it, but something has changed about you." I turned to her and delivered my rehearsed line with perfect sincerity. "I'm just trying to be the man you want me to be." Victoria smiled at my response. But for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I could see genuine nervousness creeping into her facial expressions and body language. She was starting to realize that she couldn't read me anymore, couldn't predict my reactions, or manipulate my emotions the way she had become accustomed to doing. And for the first time in our entire relationship, I was finally playing her manipulation game better than she could ever imagine. The student had become the master in this twisted psychological warfare, and Victoria had no idea what was coming next in my carefully orchestrated plan to expose her completely. Things began accelerating rapidly after that pivotal conversation. Victoria's anxiety was showing clearly now, even through all the layers of manipulation and performance art that she typically wrapped herself in like protective armor. I could see her starting to pace around our house more frequently when she thought I wasn't looking directly at her, and her phone never left her hand anymore, not even when she was sleeping. At night, she clung to her phone like it was a lifeline to oxygen, and she changed her password twice in just 1 week. A clear sign that she was becoming paranoid about me discovering something incriminating. She also started checking all the door locks in our house obsessively before going to bed, like she was afraid that someone might try to break in during the night. Victoria's carefully constructed walls of deception weren't just showing cracks anymore. They were completely collapsing around her, piece by piece. And I was giving her absolutely no obvious reason to panic, which was making her paranoia even worse. I continued coming home with fresh flowers for her, telling her she looked beautiful every single day, and I even booked us a reservation at the same upscale restaurant where we had celebrated our anniversary dinner 3 years ago. I was acting like a man who was desperately trying to hit the reset button on our marriage, like someone who believed that romantic gestures and renewed attention could somehow fix whatever was wrong between us. Victoria melted into these romantic gestures completely, drinking way too much wine during our anniversary dinner and laughing way too loudly at everything I said. That desperate, manic laughter that people use when they're one step away from the edge of a complete breakdown and pretending they're not falling apart. I watched her carefully throughout the entire evening, catching all the little revealing details that betrayed her true emotional state. I noticed how she jumped nervously at every phone vibration, how she texted from under the table when she thought I was looking away, and how she excused herself mid-meal to make what she claimed was an urgent private phone call outside the restaurant. I followed her outside quietly and positioned myself where I could hear her conversation without being detected. I heard her say into the phone with barely controlled panic, "No, I don't think he knows anything yet, but something feels different. Just give me more time to figure this out and handle the situation." She continued, "He's being weirdly sweet lately, almost too sweet, and it's making me nervous. It's almost over, I promise. Everything will be sorted soon, and then we can be together." Victoria kept repeating the phrase, "almost over," like it was a mantra she was using to calm herself down and maintain her resolve. She had absolutely no idea how right she was about our marriage being almost over, but she was completely wrong about who was going to be in control of how it ended. That night, I printed out every single piece of evidence I had collected over the past months. All the text messages, all the receipts, the hotel surveillance footage, the bank records showing her systematic theft, and every other document that proved her systematic betrayal of our marriage. I sealed everything in a thick manila envelope and mailed it priority delivery to Victoria's parents' house, with signature required so there would be no way for them to miss receiving it. Victoria's parents had always loved me and treated me like the son they never had, and I knew they absolutely hated dishonesty and deception of any kind. They would not take kindly to discovering what their daughter had been doing behind my back. 2 days after I mailed the evidence package to Victoria's parents, she received a phone call that changed everything. We were sitting at our dinner table, eating what should have been a normal, quiet meal together, when her mother's number started flashing on her phone screen. Victoria immediately got up from the table and stepped outside onto our back patio to take the call privately, leaving me alone with my thoughts and growing anticipation. She was gone for almost 25 minutes, which told me that her parents had taken their time going through every single piece of evidence I had sent them. When Victoria finally came back inside the house, her face was completely pale and drained of all color. Her jaw was clenched tight with tension, and I could see that her hands were actually trembling slightly as she tried to compose herself. Victoria didn't say a single word to me about the phone call. She simply sat back down at our dinner table and started picking at her food like she was chewing rocks instead of the meal I had carefully prepared for us. I said absolutely nothing and waited patiently, letting the heavy silence stretch between us while she processed whatever devastating conversation she had just had with her mother. The next day, Victoria's father showed up at our front door completely unexpectedly. When I opened the door, he didn't speak or offer any greeting at all. Instead, he just looked me directly in the eyes with an expression of understanding and sympathy that told me everything I needed to know about his opinion of his daughter's behavior. He nodded once with what seemed like respect for how I had handled this impossible situation. Then he handed me a small manila envelope without saying a word. "In case you need this," he said quietly, his voice heavy with disappointment and shame about what his daughter had done to our marriage. After that brief exchange, he simply walked away from our house without another word, leaving me standing in the doorway holding whatever additional support he had decided to provide. Inside the envelope was a notarized affidavit that served as a detailed character statement about me, written and signed by both of Victoria's parents. Along with their official statement were copies of text messages that Victoria had sent to her sister last summer, messages where she had been bragging proudly about the freedom and excitement of juggling multiple men while still maintaining her marriage to me for comfort, stability, and financial security. In those messages to her sister, Victoria had written things like, "Tyler has no idea what I'm doing, and honestly, I don't think he'd have the balls to do anything about it even if he found out. I get the best of both worlds, excitement and adventure with other men, plus a comfortable home and reliable income from my husband. It's the perfect setup." I carefully added this devastating new evidence to my growing file, then waited patiently for Victoria to come home so I could gauge her reaction to whatever her father had told her during his unexpected visit. When she finally walked through our front door that evening, I asked her casually and conversationally, "Did you happen to talk to your parents today about anything important?" Victoria froze completely in place, like someone had pressed a pause button on her entire existence. "Yeah, just checking in with them, the usual family stuff," she replied, with obvious nervousness creeping into her voice. She forced what had to be the most unconvincing smile I had ever seen her attempt. "Everything's fine, of course. Why do you ask?" I leaned forward across our kitchen table, folding my hands together like I was preparing to pray, and said softly but clearly, "That's funny, because your dad dropped by here earlier today." Victoria's face immediately turned a color I had never seen before. Not pale, not red, but this weird flickering combination of panic and terror that made her look like she was about to either faint or run away. "What? Why would he come here? What did he want?" she asked, with barely controlled hysteria in her voice. I didn't answer her questions directly. Instead, I just stared at her silently, letting the weight of her own guilt and fear do the work for me. She blinked rapidly and swallowed hard, clearly trying to figure out how much I knew and how much trouble she was actually in. Then Victoria said the words that finally cracked her perfect little acting performance wide open. "What did he tell you exactly?" And there it was, the confession I had been waiting for. She didn't ask, "What's wrong?" or "What happened?" or even, "What are you talking about?" No, her first instinct was to ask what her father had revealed to me, because she knew deep down in her guilty conscience that the walls were finally closing in around her. She knew that her parents had discovered the truth about her affairs, her lies, and her systematic theft of our money. She knew that her carefully constructed web of deception was finally unraveling, and she was terrified about what other evidence might be coming to light. I stood up slowly from my chair and walked over to our kitchen counter with deliberate, measured movements. I slid open the drawer where I had stashed the envelope her father had given me, then placed it gently on the table directly in front of her. Victoria didn't touch the envelope at all. She didn't even blink or look down at it. She just stared at me with growing terror in her eyes, like she was watching her entire world collapse in real time. I leaned down close enough to her face that she could hear every single word I was about to say with perfect clarity. "You've got until Friday to tell me everything. All of it. Every man, every lie, every stolen dollar from our accounts, every hotel room, every fake business trip, every moment you betrayed our marriage vows." I continued with cold determination. "Or I send my complete version of this story to your office, your gym, and your precious little book club where you pretend to be such a devoted wife. Everyone you work with, everyone you exercise with, and all your friends will know exactly what kind of person you really are. Victoria's mouth parted slightly like she wanted to scream, or maybe cry, or maybe beg me for mercy and forgiveness. But all she managed to do was nod just once in complete defeat. Friday was 3 days away, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I was finally in complete control of the situation and Victoria's fate. The hunter had become the hunted, and she was trapped with absolutely nowhere to run and no way to lie her way out of the corner she had painted herself into with months of systematic betrayal and deception. Friday came, and Victoria finally broke completely under the pressure I had been systematically applying for weeks. But her breakdown didn't happen like it does in movies. There was no dramatic sobbing, no tearful confession delivered while sitting on our bed begging for forgiveness, and no apologies that sounded like genuine redemption or remorse. Instead, it happened in ugly, sharp, defensive pieces, like watching someone smash glass in slow motion while pretending it wasn't their fault that everything was breaking apart. Victoria sat me down at our kitchen table after dinner. The same dinner I had cooked like always, chicken stir-fry with vegetables, with the scent of garlic still hanging in the air around us when she finally decided to say the words that would end our marriage. "You want the truth?" "Fine," she said, with no build-up or ceremony at all. Her voice was filled with pure venom and barely controlled rage. "There were 4 guys, okay? One was a complete mistake that didn't mean anything. The other 3 just happened naturally over time, and I'm not going to apologize for finding connections with people who actually understand me." I didn't speak a single word in response. I just stared at her like I was watching a complete stranger steal my wife's face and wear it like a twisted mask while confessing to destroying everything we had built together. Victoria continued talking, her eyes flickering nervously between rage and what looked like complete panic about losing control of the narrative. "Derek was absolutely nothing to me," she continued defensively. "He was clingy and boring as hell, always wanting to talk about feelings and the future. The second guy, Marcus, he's not even in the state anymore. He moved away for work, so that's completely over and done with." She trailed off when she got to discussing the third man, her jaw flexing with tension as she clearly struggled with how much to reveal. "And the last one," she said, pausing like she was deciding whether to lie or tell the truth. "He promised me things you never could. Financial freedom, adventure, a life that's actually exciting instead of this boring suburban routine we've fallen into. It's not what you think it is. It's not just about sex or cheap thrills. But I knew it was exactly what I thought it was, because I had been documenting everything for months. I knew about all 4 guys she had mentioned, plus the additional one she didn't mention. The one she was still texting under the fake name Rebecca in her phone contacts, thinking she was clever enough to hide a 5th affair partner from me, even while confessing to the other 4. "Why?" I asked her simply. It wasn't a dramatic whisper, or me begging for some kind of closure that would make sense of the devastation she had caused. It was just a straightforward question, flat and dry, like asking someone why they took the last cookie from a jar without asking permission first. Victoria actually laughed at my question, that sharp, defensive kind of laugh she always used when she was cornered and trying to regain control of a situation. "Because you got boring, Tyler," she said, with cruel honesty. "You used to be fun and spontaneous when we first got together. You'd surprise me, take me to new places, make me feel alive and excited about what was coming next." She continued her attack. "Now you're just another guy who thinks being safe and reliable is enough to keep a woman interested. You think being a good man is some kind of protective shield that guarantees a happy marriage, like that automatically protects you from getting left behind when someone better comes along." My jaw tightened with controlled anger as I listened to her completely rewrite the history of our relationship. Then Victoria made everything so much worse by delivering what felt like a calculated blow designed to destroy whatever self-respect I had left. "You think being a good man means something special?" she asked with obvious contempt. "Like that protects you from getting replaced? Good men are a dime a dozen, Tyler. What I needed was someone who could make me feel like I was actually living, instead of just existing in this comfortable but suffocating routine we created." I stood up from the table and walked over to our kitchen window, looking outside at a world that appeared completely normal. Birds flying between trees, regular traffic moving down our street, neighbors going about their ordinary daily routines. But inside our house, it felt like we were in the middle of total emotional warfare. "You were going to leave," I stated as a fact rather than asking it as a question. "Take all our money and just disappear without any explanation or warning." Victoria didn't deny my accusation at all. Instead, she just said coldly and matter-of-factly, "It was mine too. I contributed to that money and I had every right to take my share when I decided to start a new life. That's when I decided to drop my final card in this devastating game we had been playing. I turned around to face her directly, pulled the flash drive from my pocket that contained every piece of evidence I had collected, and tossed it casually onto our kitchen table between us. "Everything's on there," I said, with complete calm and control. "Every message, every receipt, every video, every bank transaction, every lie you've told me over the past months. It's already been backed up in 3 separate locations for safekeeping, and one of those backup copies gets sent automatically to several people if anything suspicious happens to me." Victoria froze completely in place as the implications of what I was telling her sank in. All the color drained from her face, not because she suddenly felt guilt or remorse for what she had done to our marriage, but because she finally realized that she had been completely outplayed in a game she thought she was winning. "I want a divorce," I said firmly and clearly. "I want the house, I want my money back from what you stole, and I want you gone from my life permanently. You don't get to negotiate, you don't get to make demands, and you definitely don't get to play victim after what you've done." Victoria opened her mouth like she was going to protest or try to argue with my terms, but I held up my hand to stop her before she could say another word. "You don't get to talk anymore," I said with finality. "You've said enough lies to last several lifetimes. From now on, your lawyers can talk to my lawyers, and you can explain your systematic theft and adultery to a judge." Victoria shut her mouth immediately, clearly understanding that she had lost all power in this situation. 3 days later, she moved out of our house with nothing but a single suitcase, offering no goodbyes, no apologies, and no acknowledgement of the destruction she had caused. She just left like a ghost that had finally been exorcised from our home. But I wasn't done with her yet because some ghosts need to be completely burned before they stop haunting the people they've damaged. After Victoria left, the silence in our house felt different from anything I had experienced before. It wasn't the peaceful, healing kind of quiet that people talk about when they describe moving on from traumatic experiences. It wasn't the cinematic silence where curtains blow softly in the breeze while melancholy music fades beautifully in the background, and you sip your coffee in peaceful reflection about lessons learned. Instead, it was jagged, disjointed, and deeply uncomfortable. Every single object in our home had suddenly become an unwanted memory that I hadn't asked for and definitely didn't want to keep. The chair where Victoria used to sit while scrolling through her phone and texting her affair partners, the towel still hanging on our bathroom door that smelled like her shampoo, that damn chipped coffee mug she always forgot on the kitchen counter. Everything felt contaminated by her presence. But slowly, these reminders began to lose their emotional weight over me. Or maybe I simply stopped allowing them to press down on my chest constantly, suffocating me with memories of a woman who had never really existed in the first place. The version of Victoria I had loved and married was just an elaborate performance designed to secure a comfortable lifestyle, while she explored other options behind my back. Victoria had left in such a desperate hurry that she didn't even bother packing half of her belongings, probably assuming that I would be too emotionally broken to care about her abandoned possessions. She was completely wrong about that assumption. I methodically boxed up every single item she had left behind with surgical precision and care, every sweater, every bottle of perfume, every book, every framed photo of us that had been lies for God knows how long. I stacked all her belongings neatly in our garage and locked the door tight. If Victoria wanted her things back, she would have to come here and look me directly in the eyes, face the man she had tried to systematically destroy, and ask for them like an adult. But that wasn't even the most satisfying part of my post-separation strategy. That weekend, I met with my divorce attorney again to finalize our legal approach. I showed him the contents of the flash drive, the notarized affidavit from Victoria's father, all the financial records documenting her systematic theft, the GPS tracking logs, and the complete backup of her text message conversations with multiple affair partners. The lawyer examined everything carefully with professional satisfaction, nodding once when he finished reviewing the comprehensive evidence I had collected. "We're going to absolutely bury her in court," he said with confidence. "She won't have any legal ground to stand on when this goes before a judge." I didn't want vengeance exactly. What I wanted was complete clarity and justice. And clarity, as it turns out, can be weaponized very effectively when you have months of documented evidence and a legal team that knows how to use it strategically. We filed the divorce papers first thing Monday morning, but instead of serving them to Victoria's new rental apartment, we had them delivered directly to her office. The process server hand-delivered the envelope right in front of all Victoria's coworkers, just before her weekly staff meeting was scheduled to begin. I wasn't required to be there to witness her reaction, but I made sure the process server was wearing a button that read, "Ask me about infidelity clauses." A little psychological touch that would ensure everyone in her office understood exactly why legal papers were being delivered to their colleague. I didn't have to be present to see the look of humiliation and shock on Victoria's face, but her sister called me that very night to fill in the details. "She's completely unraveling," her sister told me over the phone. "Victoria told our mom that you've been stalking her and that this whole thing is some kind of revenge plot because you couldn't handle being married to a strong, independent woman." I actually laughed out loud at Victoria's latest attempt to rewrite reality and cast herself as the victim in this situation. "She's been cheating on me systematically for months with multiple men," I replied simply. "I protected myself and gathered evidence. That's all. I didn't stalk anyone. I just finally stopped being blind to what was happening in my own marriage." "She can't stand the fact that I was smarter and more patient than she thought I was," I continued. "Victoria expected me to fall apart and let her walk away with everything while I blamed myself for not being good enough to keep her interested. Instead, she's facing the consequences of her own choices." Victoria's sister paused for a long moment before responding. "You're different now, Tyler," she said quietly. "This whole experience has changed you in ways that are pretty obvious to everyone who knows you." "I'm awake," I replied simply. "For the first time in years, I'm completely awake and seeing everything clearly." But apparently, it wasn't enough for Victoria to simply lose our marriage, our house, and our shared assets. She couldn't resist the urge to spin a public narrative that would make her look like the victim of an abusive, controlling husband. Victoria posted some carefully crafted, vague nonsense on her Instagram account that read, "When men can't handle strong women, they try to destroy them instead of supporting their growth. But I rise above it all and keep moving forward." Rise above what, exactly? She had been secretly sleeping with men she didn't even bother to properly identify in her phone contacts, systematically stealing money from our joint accounts, and planning to abandon our marriage without any explanation or warning. But Victoria wanted to present herself as some kind of feminist hero who was being persecuted for her independence. So I responded to her social media manipulation, but not online where she expected me to engage in a public argument that would make us both look petty and vindictive. Instead, I sent the Home Projects folder containing all my evidence directly to her gym manager, letting him know quietly and professionally that one of his employees had been having intimate relationships with multiple men at the same facility during work hours, which was clearly in breach of their employee code of conduct. Within that folder was specific documentation showing that Victoria had been meeting with personal trainers and other gym members for sexual encounters, sometimes using the facility's private spaces for activities that had nothing to do with fitness. The gym manager fired one of the trainers she had been involved with that same week, and suddenly Victoria had nothing left to post about on social media. After that strategic move, Victoria posted absolutely nothing on any of her social platforms. I began sleeping through the entire night again for the first time in months, eating regular meals without my stomach being in knots, and even smiling again sometimes when something genuinely amused me. Not because I was completely over the betrayal, God no, I wasn't even close to being healed from what she had done to me. But I was smiling because I had finally stopped feeling crazy and questioning my own sanity. I wasn't the broken one in this situation. I wasn't the liar, the cheater, or the thief. I wasn't the one who had traded love and commitment for a string of forgettable nights with people who didn't even know my real name. And every single day that passed, Victoria had to live with the knowledge that I hadn't just accidentally discovered her affairs. I had watched, planned, and executed a complete destruction of the life she thought she was building on lies and stolen money. By the end of the second week after Victoria moved out, word had spread throughout our entire social circle about what had really happened to our marriage. The truth moved quietly, of course, because scandals like Victoria's don't make loud, dramatic announcements in public spaces. Instead, they rot and fester in dark corners, whispered from ear to ear until everyone knows the real story. But no one says anything directly out loud about it. Victoria's social circle fractured with incredible speed once people learned about her systematic affairs and financial theft. Natalie, who had been Victoria's supposed best friend for years, and the person Victoria used to lie to me about hanging out with when she was actually meeting her affair partners, blocked Victoria completely on every social media platform and communication method. There was no phone call, no dramatic confrontation, no explanation offered whatsoever. Natalie just disappeared from Victoria's life entirely overnight. It turns out that Natalie's boyfriend had received a little educational gift from an anonymous email address. The package contained a video of Victoria making out passionately with one of her coworkers in a car parked outside the gym after hours, along with timestamps proving that this had happened while Victoria was supposed to be having an innocent girls' night out with Natalie. I didn't even have to say a word or make any direct accusations. I just nudged the first domino gently and watched Victoria's entire social network collapse around her. Victoria started showing up at our house unannounced and uninvited, appearing on our front porch at random times during the week. She wasn't yelling, crying dramatically, or making big emotional scenes like you might expect from someone whose life was falling apart. Instead, she would just stand there talking calmly, as if all the destruction and chaos around her could somehow be walked back in time through rational conversation. "You really think this is justice?" she asked me one evening, standing on our porch wearing the same denim jacket she had worn the night she cheated on me for the first time. "You think destroying my entire life makes you better than me somehow?" I didn't even bother opening the front door to have this conversation face to face. Instead, I spoke through the glass clearly and calmly. "No, Victoria, but it makes me free from you," I replied. And that's all I ever wanted, to be free from the lies, the manipulation, and the constant feeling that I was going crazy while you systematically betrayed everything we built together. Victoria stood there for a very long time, her eyes glassy and unfocused, her jaw twitching with barely controlled rage. I thought she might finally scream at me, or break something, or maybe even tell me some version of the truth about why she had chosen to destroy our marriage so completely. Instead, she just walked away silently without saying another word. The next day, I had Victoria removed from every shared account and service that connected us in any way. I took her off our joint insurance policy, removed her from our phone plan, canceled her access to our Netflix account, and systematically eliminated every single piece of our shared life that she had been leeching onto without ever earning or contributing to meaningfully. I also changed all the locks on our house and cleared out her side of our bedroom closet completely. Victoria sent me a text message the following day that read, "You're not the man I married anymore." She was absolutely right about that observation. The man she had married believed in her completely and unconditionally. That man bent over backward, trying to make her happy and secure. That man loved her without question and would have forgiven almost anything if she had come to him honestly about her struggles. But that man was gone forever, replaced by someone who had learned painful lessons about trust, manipulation, and the difference between love and performance. I replied to her text with just one line: "No, I'm the man you created through your choices." That night, I got an unexpected phone call from my friend Kyle, the tech guy who had helped me with the GPS tracking and phone backup systems at the beginning of this nightmare. "You might want to check this out," Kyle said, and he immediately sent me a screenshot of something Victoria had created online. She had set up a burner Twitter account under a completely fake name, and it was filled with vague victim stories about emotional abuse, controlling behavior, and being watched and stalked constantly by a manipulative ex-husband. Victoria's fake account had zero proof of any actual abuse, but it was attracting plenty of followers who were eager to believe her manufactured narrative about being victimized by a man who couldn't handle her independence and strength. She was trying to crowdsource sympathy and validation from strangers on the internet who didn't know anything about the real situation. I didn't respond emotionally or get defensive about Victoria's latest attempt to control the story. Instead, I methodically uploaded the security camera video from the hotel hallway, showing Victoria and Derek laughing together like two high school students sneaking out of detention. The footage clearly showed them entering the hotel room together, with date and timestamp information visible in the corner. I posted this video to a private, anonymous webpage with no names mentioned and no locations identified. The only caption I included was a single sentence: "Narratives crumble when you have receipts." I then sent the link privately to the same people who had been following Victoria's burner account and believing her victim stories. The video didn't go viral or become some kind of internet sensation. It didn't need to spread widely to be effective. It just circulated quietly, like truth always does eventually, making its way to the people who needed to see it. Victoria deleted her entire fake Twitter account just 2 days later, and I never heard about her online victim narrative again after that. But something fundamental had changed in me permanently during this entire process. I had always believed that betrayal was something you felt emotionally, a punch to the gut, a hot flash of pain in your chest, a moment of devastating realization that breaks your heart instantly. But the truth is that betrayal, real systematic betrayal like what Victoria had done to me, is actually cold, calculated, patient, and methodical. And I had finally learned to be just as cold, calculated, patient, and methodical in response. By the third week of our separation, Victoria wasn't even pretending to maintain her usual facade anymore. Not with me, not with her family, not with anyone else in her life. The fake smiles had disappeared completely. The carefully curated social media presence had dried up entirely. The performative confidence that had once fueled her every word and gesture had turned brittle and exhausted. Victoria showed up at our house one more time, but this time, she didn't come to the front door to try to have a conversation with me. Instead, she parked across the street and just sat in her car watching our house, like she was waiting for something specific to happen, or maybe just hoping desperately for some sign that there was still a way back from the complete destruction of her life. I didn't engage with her surveillance at all. I didn't call the police, make threats, or try to force her to leave. I just let Victoria sit in that heavy, uncomfortable silence, staring at a house she used to own half of legally. I let her wonder how she had become the outsider looking in at a life that had once been hers to control and manipulate. That's when I decided to deliver the final devastating blow to Victoria's attempts to control the narrative about our marriage. This wasn't motivated by spite or petty revenge. It came from a place of complete clarity and a desire to expose the truth for anyone else who might be going through a similar situation. I had been holding on to one crucial piece of evidence that I hadn't used yet strategically, something that would demolish any remaining sympathy people might have for Victoria's victim act. I had a voice memo recorded from Victoria's phone from the night before she moved out of our house. That evening, she had been drunk and sloppy after consuming most of a bottle of wine by herself, and we had gotten into a heated argument about absolutely nothing important. Something ridiculous like spilled wine on the coffee table and who had forgotten to buy groceries that week. During that pointless, alcohol-fueled fight, Victoria had let something crucial slip out that revealed her true character completely. In a moment of drunken honesty, she had said with cruel laughter, "I could cheat on you again and again, and you still wouldn't do anything about it because you're completely pathetic and weak. You don't have the balls to leave me or fight back." She had laughed cruelly after saying those words, like the idea of my powerlessness was genuinely amusing to her. I had walked away from that argument at the time, but my phone had been recording everything because I had started documenting all our conversations weeks earlier. Victoria had no idea that her moment of drunken honesty had been captured permanently, so I created a clean, professional video, just me sitting in front of one camera with no theatrical dramatics or emotional manipulation. I didn't mention Victoria by name, didn't insult her character, and didn't turn it into a personal attack that would make me look vindictive or petty. Instead, I simply shared a universal truth about recognizing emotional abuse and manipulation. There's a moment when you stop being angry about betrayal and start seeing the truth for what it actually is, I said calmly into the camera. Not all monsters look like monsters when you first meet them. Some wear your wedding ring and sleep in your bed. Some say they love you while they're calculating how to leave you with nothing, I continued. If you're out there right now and you're being lied to, manipulated, or made to feel like you're the problem in your relationship, I want you to know something important. Start recording everything. Start watching carefully. Start trusting your instincts instead of their explanations. You'll find out who they really are when they think no one is paying attention. I paired this video with the audio clip of Victoria's drunken confession, letting her own words speak for themselves without any commentary or interpretation from me. I posted the entire thing anonymously on a platform where it would reach people who needed to hear this message, and within 2 days, it had been viewed over 100,000 times. By the end of that week, people were quoting the video everywhere, sharing it across social media platforms, and sending me private messages with their own stories of betrayal, manipulation, and gaslighting by partners who had made them feel crazy for trusting their own perceptions. I hadn't just exposed Victoria's lies and manipulative behavior. I had opened the floodgates for hundreds of other people like me, men and women who had been systematically gaslit, used financially, betrayed sexually, and made to feel like they were paranoid for questioning their cheating partner's increasingly elaborate stories. Victoria must have seen the video or heard about it from someone, because her behavior changed dramatically after it went public. She didn't message me directly about the video, but her friend Hannah sent me a text that read, "She's not okay at all right now. You've completely broken her spirit, and I think you should know that whatever you're trying to accomplish here has gone way too far." And for the first time in months of systematic betrayal, emotional manipulation, and financial theft, I felt absolutely nothing inside when I read that message. Not satisfaction, not guilt, Not even vindication or a sense of victory over someone who had tried to destroy my life. Just complete emptiness. The kind of peaceful silence that comes when someone finally stops taking up space in your mind and heart. The space that Victoria had occupied in my thoughts for years was finally empty, and that silence was finally mine to fill with whatever I chose. I had spent so much time and energy trying to understand her motivations, decode her lies, and protect myself from her manipulations. Now she was just gone, like smoke that had finally been blown away by a strong wind. I didn't expect to receive any communication from Victoria after the video went public, but about a week later, an unexpected letter arrived at my house. It came in a plain white envelope with no return address anywhere on it, just my name, Tyler Walker, written in Victoria's distinctive handwriting, the same neat cursive she used to use when labeling my lunch containers during our early married days when we were broke college students. I recognized that familiar handwriting immediately. The neat little curl on the T, the specific pressure points on the W that she had always made. I stared at the envelope for a good 10 minutes before opening it carefully, wondering what final manipulation or desperate plea might be waiting for me inside. The letter contained 2 pages of handwritten text, and from the very first line, it was clear that this wouldn't be an apology, expression of regret, or acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. Instead, it was Victoria in her rawest, most stripped-down form, with all her usual games and performances finally abandoned. "You've made your point," she wrote in that bitter, defensive tone I had come to recognize so well. "I get it completely now. You're the better person, the stronger one, the one who had more patience and strategy. Congratulations on winning this whole thing." She was still calling our marriage's destruction a game, which told me that Victoria fundamentally didn't understand what had happened between us. This was never about winning or losing anything. It was about truth, honesty, and finally pulling the mask off a woman who had hidden behind the pretense of love while systematically dismantling everything we had built together. Victoria continued in the letter. "I messed up, fine, but I wasn't alone in this situation. You weren't some perfect saint either during our marriage. You got boring, predictable, and obsessed with being good instead of being real and exciting. Even in her moment of supposed honesty, she was still making excuses, still avoiding real ownership of her choices, and still trying to distribute blame between us like we had both contributed equally to the destruction of our marriage. There was no genuine reflection, no understanding of how her actions had affected me, just more defensive justifications wrapped in bitter resentment. But then on the second page of Victoria's letter, something fundamental in her tone changed completely. There was a noticeable shift from bitter anger and defensive blame to what sounded like genuine desperation and the dawning realization of how completely her life had collapsed around her. "I have absolutely nothing left now," she wrote. And for the first time in the entire letter, her words seemed to come from a place of honest vulnerability rather than calculated manipulation. "My parents won't speak to me anymore, and my sister has blocked me on everything. They look at me like I'm some kind of stranger who stole their daughter's identity," she continued. "Derek told everyone at the office about our affair after you sent him those photos and messages. I'm suspended pending a full investigation by HR, and people literally whisper when I walk by them in the hallway. My landlord wants to raise my rent significantly because he heard about the divorce and thinks I'm a financial risk now." Victoria went on, "I don't even know who I am anymore without all of it. Without the men, without the lies, without the constant performance I was putting on for everyone around me. I built my entire identity around this elaborate act, and now that it's all gone, I feel like I'm just empty." For a brief moment, just a flickering instant, I felt an echo of the woman I had once loved with everything I had. Not because I forgave her for the systematic betrayal, and definitely not because I pitied her current situation, but because I finally understood Victoria completely for the first time in our entire relationship. Victoria had never been a whole person to begin with. She had constructed herself entirely from borrowed attention, temporary highs, and cheap connections with people who didn't really know her. When those external sources of validation crumbled around her, so did she, piece by piece, because there was no authentic core underneath all the performance and manipulation. But then the very last line of her letter brought me back to reality and reminded me why our marriage had been doomed from the start. "Just tell me one thing, Tyler. Was there ever a version of us where I could have been enough for you? Where you could have loved me the way I actually am instead of the way you wanted me to be?" I didn't reply to Victoria's letter, not because I didn't have an answer to her question, but because the answer was both yes and devastatingly painful to acknowledge. There absolutely was a version of our relationship where Victoria could have been enough for me, where I would have chosen her again and again despite her flaws and struggles. There was a moment, probably several moments, where Victoria could have come to me broken and honest about everything she was feeling, everything she was doing, and every mistake she was making. If she had approached me with genuine vulnerability instead of elaborate deception, I would have chosen to fight for our marriage instead of building a case to destroy it. But Victoria had lit that bridge herself when she decided that lying, stealing, and betraying me was easier than having difficult conversations about what she actually needed from our relationship. And I learned something deeply painful about love during that realization. Love doesn't always die in dramatic, explosive moments like you see in movies. Sometimes love just gets slowly smothered under layers of disappointment, broken promises, and systematic betrayal until you don't recognize its face anymore. Sometimes the person you thought you married reveals themselves to be someone completely different, and you have to grieve both the relationship you lost and the person you thought you knew. I folded Victoria's letter carefully and burned it in our fireplace that same evening. I didn't destroy it out of hate, anger, or a desire to erase her from my memory completely. I burned it as an act of closure and finality, a symbolic ending to a chapter of my life that had been written in lies and manipulation. There would be no more responses from me, no more attempts at communication, no more drama or emotional warfare between us. There would only be the ashes of what we used to be, finally reduced to their most basic elements and allowed to disappear completely. Life after betrayal isn't quiet in the way that people expect it to be. It's not the peaceful, contemplative silence that movies portray, where gentle music plays in the background while the protagonist sips coffee and reflects meaningfully on lessons learned. Real life after systematic betrayal is jagged, disjointed, and deeply uncomfortable in ways that catch you off guard at random moments. Every mundane object in your shared space becomes a potential trigger for unwanted memories. The coffee maker she used every morning, the couch where she sat while texting her affair partners, the bathroom mirror where she applied makeup before meeting other men. Everything carries emotional weight that you didn't ask for and don't want to carry. But gradually, very slowly, these everyday reminders began to lose their power over my emotional state. Maybe the objects themselves changed, or maybe I simply stopped allowing them to press down on my chest with suffocating memories of a woman who had never really existed in the first place. The day our divorce was officially finalized in court, I didn't feel the dramatic sense of closure or relief that I had expected. The judge's voice was completely monotone and professional, like she was reading items off a grocery list rather than formally ending 6 years of marriage. Petitioner is awarded the house, vehicle, and financial assets listed in Section C, she announced without any emotion or ceremony. Respondent waives all claims to spousal support and acknowledges responsibility for systematic marital misconduct. That was it. Nothing more dramatic or meaningful than a few legal sentences and a digital signature on official paperwork. Victoria didn't show up to the court hearing at all. She didn't even participate remotely through video call, which told me that she had finally accepted the inevitable outcome of her choices. Instead of facing the legal consequences of her actions in person, I received a voicemail from her later that night. There were no tears in her voice, no begging for forgiveness or mercy, no dramatic declarations of regret or remorse. Just Victoria's voice, flat and barely audible, saying, "I hope this version of yourself makes you happy, Tyler." Then the message ended, and I deleted it immediately without any hesitation whatsoever. The next few days brought a strange kind of clarity that I hadn't experienced in months. I started sleeping through the entire night without waking up anxious or angry. I cleaned out our garage completely, removing the last traces of Victoria's abandoned belongings. I bought new bed sheets in a color I actually liked, blue ones instead of the gray ones Victoria had insisted on because they matched her aesthetic vision for our bedroom. I donated the dining room set that Victoria had insisted on buying during our second year of marriage, the one that had always felt too formal and uncomfortable for our daily life together. It was one of those expensive matching pieces that looked perfect in home design magazines but felt cold and unwelcoming when you actually tried to use it for regular meals. I had never liked eating at that table, but I had gone along with Victoria's vision because I thought compromise was what good husbands did. I also ripped up the backyard patio project that we had started building together, but never finished. The half-completed stonework and abandoned materials had been sitting there for months, serving as a constant reminder of all the plans and dreams that Victoria had pretended to share with me while she was secretly planning her escape. Instead of trying to salvage something from that failed project, I decided to start completely fresh with my own hands and my own design. One quiet afternoon, while I was clearing out more remnants of our shared life, I found my old camera equipment buried deep in a closet. Photography had been a serious hobby of mine before Victoria and I got married, but somewhere along the way, I had dropped it completely, losing that creative outlet under the weight of trying to keep our relationship stitched together and maintaining the illusion that we were building something meaningful. I dusted off the camera carefully, checking to see if it still worked properly after years of neglect. The battery was dead, but once I charged it up, everything functioned perfectly. On impulse, I decided to take a drive, not to follow anyone or gather evidence, but just to go somewhere peaceful where I could think clearly without the emotional baggage that still clung to every corner of our house. I drove for about 3 hours upstate, heading toward areas I had never explored before, letting the road take me wherever it wanted to go. Eventually, I stopped at a scenic ridge overlook just as the sun began bleeding across the horizon in brilliant shades of gold and orange. The light was absolutely perfect, the kind of natural beauty that you can't fake or manufacture, no matter how skilled you are with editing software. I took hundreds of photos that evening, capturing different angles and perspectives of the same stunning sunset. For the first time in months, I felt completely present in the moment, instead of being consumed by anger, revenge, or the need to plan my next strategic move against Victoria. I wasn't thinking about betrayal, manipulation, or evidence collection. I was just existing in a beautiful space, appreciating something genuine and real. That night when I got home, I uploaded one of the sunset photos to my old social media profile. I didn't include any caption or explanation, no dramatic statement about moving forward or finding myself again. Just the simple image of an open road stretching toward a horizon painted in fading golden light. One of my old friends commented almost immediately, "You look free, man." And he was absolutely right. I was free, but not because I had won some kind of victory over Victoria or successfully destroyed her life in retaliation for what she had done to me. I wasn't free because she had lost everything while I had kept the house and our savings. I was free because I no longer needed Victoria to understand what she had done to our marriage. I didn't need her guilt, her remorse, her acknowledgement of the pain she had caused, or her rewritten version of our story that would somehow make sense of the betrayal. I didn't need her to validate my perceptions or confirm that the things I had discovered were as bad as they seemed. Victoria could keep all her lies, all her justifications, all her victim narratives and attempts to blame me for driving her into the arms of other men. She could continue telling herself whatever stories she needed to sleep at night. I had reclaimed myself from her manipulation, and that was infinitely more valuable than any apology or admission of wrongdoing she could have offered. There's this persistent myth in our culture that healing from betrayal is supposed to be loud and dramatic. People expect that you'll have some kind of big cinematic moment where you stand in the rain, scream into the sky like you're in a movie, and suddenly everything makes sense again. The healing is supposed to come with orchestral music, profound realizations, and a clear sense that you've moved beyond the pain into some higher level of understanding. That's not how it happened for me at all. My healing came in quiet, ordinary places that had nothing to do with Victoria or our failed marriage. It arrived on a morning when I woke up and didn't feel that familiar heaviness pressing down on my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. It came during a routine grocery shopping trip when I didn't automatically think about what kind of food Victoria would want me to buy. It happened on an evening when I sat in my backyard with a cold beer in my hand, completely relaxed and at peace, and suddenly realized that the silence around me didn't feel like punishment anymore. The quiet in my house had transformed from something oppressive and lonely into something that belonged entirely to me. Victoria never tried to come back or make any final, desperate attempts to salvage something from the wreckage of our relationship. After that last handwritten letter, she seemed to understand that whatever door she thought might still be cracked open had been permanently sealed shut. She didn't just cheat on me with multiple men over several months. She had betrayed the entire concept of what we were supposed to be building together. Victoria had taken everything soft and sacred about our relationship and used it like currency to purchase temporary excitement with people who didn't even know her real name. For a long time, I had allowed myself to believe that I was somehow failing as a husband, that if I just worked harder at loving her, stayed more patient with her moods, or found better ways to make her happy, she would eventually return to the version of herself that I had fallen in love with. But there was no returning to that woman, because that woman had never really existed in the first place. She had been a carefully constructed performance designed to secure the comfortable lifestyle and emotional stability I could provide, while Victoria explored other options and planned her eventual escape from our marriage. Once I finally stopped waiting for the Victoria I thought I knew to return, I started actually living again instead of just surviving the emotional chaos she had created. The last thing I did to close this chapter of my life completely was to delete the entire House Projects folder from my computer. I erased every photo, every text message screenshot, every piece of surveillance footage, and every document that proved Victoria's systematic betrayal. I didn't delete the evidence out of mercy or forgiveness for Victoria. I did it as a deliberate choice for myself and my own future. Her chapter didn't belong in whatever story I was going to write next, and I refused to carry the weight of her betrayal forward into whatever relationships and experiences were waiting for me. People ask me sometimes if I'll ever trust again, if I'll be able to date again or open myself up to love again after everything Victoria put me through. They want to know if the systematic betrayal and manipulation have broken something fundamental inside me that might never heal properly, or if I'll spend the rest of my life suspicious and guarded with every woman who shows interest in me. I don't know the answer to those questions yet, and I'm honestly okay with that uncertainty. What I do know is that I'm not broken, despite Victoria's best efforts to systematically dismantle my sense of reality and self-worth. I'm not bitter about what happened to our marriage, even though the betrayal was more extensive and calculated than anything I could have imagined when I first found those condoms in her drawer. I'm completely awake now, fully aware of what real manipulation looks like when someone thinks no one is watching them carefully. I know the warning signs of someone who uses love as a weapon and treats commitment like a convenience that can be discarded when something more exciting comes along. And if I ever find myself in a relationship again, if I ever meet someone who might be worth the risk of opening my heart to love and trust, I'll approach it with the hard-earned wisdom that comes from surviving systematic deception. I won't ignore red flags or explain away inconsistencies in their stories. I won't make excuses for behavior that doesn't align with their words. If you're reading this story right now, if you're currently stuck in that horrible space between suspicion and certainty, between hoping you're wrong and knowing you're probably right about your partner's betrayal, I want to share some advice that might help you navigate this impossible situation. Stop waiting for the truth to present itself to you like a voluntary confession from someone who suddenly develops a conscience. Stop hoping that your cheating partner will have a moment of clarity and come clean about everything they've been hiding from you. Stop believing that love and patience will eventually win out over lies and selfishness. Instead, start watching their behavior more carefully. Start listening to the inconsistencies in their stories. Start believing what your gut instincts are already telling you deep down, even when your heart desperately wants to make excuses for them. Trust the evidence of your own eyes and ears instead of their explanations for why nothing is ever quite what it appears to be. When you finally discover the truth, and you will discover it if you stop letting them gaslight you into questioning your own perceptions. When you find the hotel receipts, or the stranger's number in their phone, or the unopened box of condoms that has no legitimate reason to exist, don't fall apart completely and let the shock paralyze you. Instead, channel that devastating energy into building something constructive, even if what you're building is just a stronger, more aware version of yourself. Take control of the situation instead of letting them control the narrative about what's happening to your relationship. Document everything, protect your assets, and prepare yourself for the reality that the person you thought you knew probably never existed in the first place. Because in the end, when all the drama settles and the legal proceedings are finished, and the silence finally returns to your life for good, you'll realize that the most painful betrayals are often the ones that ultimately give you the clearest, most honest view of who you really are and who you will never allow yourself to become again. Goodbye, Victoria. You were the storm that nearly destroyed everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and commitment. But storms, no matter how destructive and terrifying they seem while you're trapped in the middle of them, eventually pass and move on to wreak havoc somewhere else. I was the anchor that held steady through every wave of manipulation, every calculated lie, every attempt to make me question my own sanity and perception of reality. Anchors don't break under pressure. They dig deeper into solid ground and hold their position no matter how violent the storm becomes around them. Now the storm has passed completely, and I'm sailing in clear skies again. I have a compass that points toward truth instead of convenient fiction, and I'm heading toward a horizon that belongs entirely to me. The water is calm, the wind is steady, and for the first time in years, I know exactly where I'm going because I'm the one steering the ship. Victoria thought she was writing the ending to my story, that she would be the one to determine how our relationship concluded and what lessons I would take away from the experience. But she was wrong about that. just like she was wrong about so many other things during our time together. I had the pen in my hand the entire time, even when I didn't realize it. I was the author of this story from the moment I decided to start paying attention to the truth instead of the performance. Victoria's chapter is finally over, closed permanently, and filed away in the past where it belongs. But my story? My story is just beginning, and it's going to be written with honesty, self-respect, and the kind of clear-eyed awareness that only comes from surviving something that was designed to break you completely. The next chapters will be better, because I'll be writing them as someone who knows the difference between love and manipulation, between partnership and exploitation, between someone who deserves my trust and someone who sees that trust as weakness to be exploited. And that knowledge, painful as it was to acquire, is worth more than any marriage that was built on lies could ever have been.